folks, today we're going to talk about how to mend floats on your products. In this case I have a scarf and I used the Gusto and it came from the One Skein Wonder scarf, and you know, as usual, I don't see them sometimes when I'm weaving them, and then all of a sudden when I take it off there's a slew of them. So, or you see them when you're weaving them and you can't decide whether to go back or mend them later because you really don't know how to mend them. So there's a couple of ways to mend them, and I'm going to show you that. But I'm also going to show you one thing. As I was weaving this, I did see this float, which is really hard to see on this type of fabric because it's speckled. And it was right there. That's a float. And if you noticed, I took some white thread, totally different material, totally everything, and I tagged it. Easiest way to do that, just keep a little bit of scrap around and actually just thread a tapestry needle. I tend to use the metal ones because I can find them. Plus, if you have a magnet, you can easily put these on there. I did find a couple more in here. For some reason, I had a lot of problems right at the center of it. As you can see, I had one way down here, and then I had these two. Usually, if you have two together, look real closely because there could be possibly more. And that's exactly what I did. And so when I did this, I actually see there's another one right here. And there's another one right here. I didn't do too good in this area. So anyway, but if you want to tag them, it actually makes it easier. So when I tag them, I usually do one at a time in case there's a lot. So take them, just do them just like this, and then just do a little overhand knot like that. This actually keeps everything visually ready, so you're not trying to hunt for stuff. Sometimes you put products away and then do finishing some other time. This is what's really helpful because you won't remember kind of what you had problems with. So I always do this and then save that for later. All right, so we're going to do a close-up now of doing a couple of mends. One, I'm going to do it taking it out, and then one I'm going to do a splice. All right, so here's the first mend we're going to do right here. And the reason I'm mending this one this way is because of the close proximity to the very edge of it. When I started, I actually have knots in this. This is where I lashed to the actual front rod. And so first thing I need to do, I'm not going to take this off yet because it's very hard to see these floats because of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull a little bit. I want to see in what bundle this one's in. All right, so it's in this bundle right here. Unsure of what I'm going to do with my fringe, I'm going to go ahead and pull this knot out, okay? And then I'm going to figure out which one of these is actually part of this one. So in order to do that, you're basically doing almost like a pull in a sweater. I'm not pulling it back here, I'm pulling it toward this way, okay? This is a very short mend. So once I figure out which one it is, I can actually see the tension streak. It may be hard to see from where you're at, but so from here, I can see it right here. So it's this one right here, all right? Now, using needles, we talk about this too. This one has a very, very sharp point on it, okay? This one is just a big tapestry needle, blunt, and this one's a smaller one. This needle right here with the point, I tend to stay away from because sometimes it will unply the threads. So with this one, I'm not going to use. I just tend to stay with either this one or this one. This is okay to use. It'll open up the space that I'm going to reweave. This one, if you prefer small, that's fine too. I'm going to try this one and see. So when I get my thread, I'm going to see it. It's right here. If you notice, I'm going to put my finger down here. If I don't, and I take this thread right here and I pull up, it could easily pull too much on this side. So I'm doing this. This is my thread. To be sure, take this thread. I'm watching here. Is it that one? And you can see that that moves. So I know that's it. So the one I have pulled the correct thread. Once again, put your finger there, pull up. And so what I'm doing is pulling this one out of the weave structure all the way to my float. Oh, that's when I unplied. So if you unply it, that means you have to reply it. You can see that some plies like this will actually do this if you're not careful, or in my case, I was acting too quick. But usually when you take this and pull it back out and spin it, it's fine. So now I'm at this point. I'm going to take and cut my white piece out, and then I'm going to pull from here. This is really a good exercise too to understand what is a weave structure. This was done on rigid heddle, so it's a plain weave, over, under, over, under. The first point right here would be these two right here. You can see these are very straight. These actually look like there's an indentation in them because these actually were woven. This one wasn't. So this is where my two floats. It actually floated over. It just didn't pick up that one. All right, so when I'm doing this, I have a tendency, when I thread my needle, these are great because they have a really big eye. I don't tie it. I usually just put the end in here like this, and I just put it right here on the edge, okay? I'm right-handed, so I tend to do this. I put my hand here because now I'm stabilizing this thread. If you want, you can take a brick or something like that. You can do that if you want. I'm not trying to mimic the same tension on the loom, but I'm trying to have some, okay? So from here, if you can do this, I've actually taken my hand and I'm putting it right here. Looking at what I need to do, I've gone under here, then I go over, and then under. Over, under. Once again, when it's speckled like this, it's hard. Over, under, over, under. You do a couple of these. Don't try to do the whole thing. I do maybe 4 or 5. And then what I'm going to do is pull my excess through here. When I get to this point, I try to hold here, because if you don't, you're going to pull another, like a tension streak through here. All you're doing is doing a very soft, and sometimes you can take your needle. You want it to be flat but not tight. If at any time you feel like this, you can feel a bump or a tension, then you know you've pulled too tight. The more you do this, the quicker you get, okay? So for me, I've been doing it a while, and so like I said, over, and I tend to pull up, push down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Once again, 4 or 5 of them, pull. Put your finger, make sure you're not pulling it. Sometimes to do this when it's closer to the edge, it's faster than it is to try to unweave it. If at any time you feel, and you feel like it's tight, then it's actually, it'll only shrink more and get tighter. The other reason for these is just much easier to thread if it comes out, so I tend to use the bigger needles. So when I get to the edge, you can see I need to over under again. I'm going to do it some more. It'll take me about, I don't know, 30 seconds to go through this. I'm a person that really, or a weaver that doesn't like a lot of splices and tails. Sometimes it's just unavoidable. And then sometimes if you have patience, you could actually sew. A good sign of a mender is if you took one thread and sewed it the whole way and you never knew it was done that way. Good practice is about the only way you're going to get better at this. Because even I do floats because of the way it's put into the warp, or it's just a fabric, or it could be a sticky yarn. There's a little hump right there, so if I gently pull on it, you want it to blend in. When I get to the edge here, I'm just going to run it all the way out. In this case, I didn't need any extra yarn to weave this. This is real loose here. I'm still just going to weave it all the way through. Because this one I just mended with its own piece from here to here. So that one's gone. The next 2 mends that I've got to do, or the 3 or 4, I'm not really checked up here where I was at here. It's way, 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 way further away from the edge, okay? It's like halfway in the middle. It's probably the worst place you can get your floats. But I noticed when I was doing this one here, if you notice there's a float here, there's actually a float here. And then there's a float here. This told me when I was weaving that something happened in this shed right here, because for it to catch or not catch in the same pick, there was a problem there and I just didn't see it. In this case, I'm going to have to take my weft from the end of my scarf to mend this one. If you look in this section here, this is the speckled yarn going across, and this mend right here, it's actually the solid. So I need two pieces. I'm going to need a purpley kind of color, and this place I'm going to need a speckled color to be able to do those. All right. So when I do that, when I come to the end of the scarf here, because this is loose right here, this area here, you can see this was my end. This is exactly what I need to mend that scarf, this part right here, because it's speckled. See how it's speckled? But I'm going to keep going just a little bit more just in case I need more. Now I need purple for the other one. So what I'm going to do first is do the speckled one. So this would probably be enough because it extends across the width and has a little bit more. It's usually about 6 inches. So I'm just going to take this, save that for the speckled mend. Check your other end. This one actually has the purple close to the speckle. So this one, instead of pulling all of this out to here, I'm just going to go to this second row here. Sometimes both sides will do that. You just need to be cautious. This one actually has a speckle too. If I had any of this left over, then I would have. Once again, I'm pinching the edges before I pull out because that allows me to pull this part without pulling the part of the actual corner. So I need back to my wonderful weaving job. So this one right here, once again I'm going to leave these in because sometimes this is easier to see where I need to weave, because otherwise you forget what track you're on. This is much harder because it is in the speckled. Alright, so to do this I need to find out which pick I was on. You can see that this is the float. And if I know what plain weave is, this thread, my warp thread, should have gone over. You can barely see it because it's under in here, right here. This is my under. So when you're looking at that, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to figure out which pick you're on. So this one should have gone over here. That's why it's got a longer float here. So what I'm going to do is go back, and I usually do about 2 inches from the end of this one. So you can see that's my float. I'm going to move all the way over, but I'm going to try to figure out where it is. This is the one I'm going to have to find, this one. So when I do that, I tend to hold like this with my fingers, and I'm stretching it like this. So when I do this, I'm going to start into the weft, and I'm going to pretend like this needle is like my shuttle. Under, over, under. Some people have put these on, if they're small enough, you can stretch them over a hoop. I tend to just do them because if you stretch it too much, your tension is exaggerated. So in this case, I'm just going over, under. As you can see, I'm working my way to the first float right here. All right. I'm just going to pull that one through. I'm doing this. I'm still over. See, I'm under this one. And there's my float. Watch my needle. It's going to go over. But if you're not careful, let me pull it to here so you can see this. If you're not careful, you're going over this one. But you need to figure out under. You have to make sure you're going over and then under that next one. Over, under, over. So when I pull this one, that first float, notice I left the white thing, this is the one that was floating. So I have kind of got my weave structure right. And I'm still not finished, but I've got that part tagged down is what I've got. Okay, so now this one that I didn't have marked, which I just saw, it's going to do the same thing, and then this one over here is going to do the same thing. Okay, So let me weave this one real quick. All right, so once again, I'm continuing. I did the first float, now I'm doing this. So I'm just following the pick. So this one goes, it goes over. So over, under, okay? I'm doing the same thing over that one. This is funny because now I've got to pull up. Then I'm going over this float right here, over that float. Then back down, pick up that one. If at any time when you get past the float, you look at it, does it look like it's still in the same track? But you can see, because this is speckled, you rarely see that. Now I've got some other tips that'll make it thinner here in a minute, but for just getting the weave back in is what's the hardest. So once again, over, I'm going to my last float. I went over, under, okay? I'm keeping going all the way. There's my float, over, push down, under. This one, since my scarf is very thin in terms of width, I'm going to run this all the way to the edge, to the selvage. Sometimes if you've drawn in a lot, this will be hard to see. So anyway, I'm just trying to go all the way to the edge. All right. So technically, if I took this and I clipped this one because that was where that mend was, clipped this one where the mend was, those are now woven in, okay? The problem looks good on one side, but when I flip it over, you can see this part right here, because this was my mend. Do you see where now I've actually floated here, but this was the one that didn't catch. The other weft, the previous weft didn't catch, okay? But since I've done that, these are the ones that I can pull out now because I already have a correct one woven in there, okay? So I know that's hard to understand, but what I'm going to do is cut this one, okay? I'm just going to literally cut that pick because this is the back side, okay? So when I cut, and I want to make sure I might cut this one because I can actually see clear. Well, I've got to make sure my eyes are working. So when you cut that one float, when these come out, there's the piece that you had woven on the top is there. So it doesn't have a hole there. It's replaced it. So here was the other float right here. This one. So I'm gonna pull. See how I'm pulling this out? I had the previous one, so it's still in there. This one, since I went to the edge, this one, I can actually pull this one all the way out. And I'm going to do something here in a minute, how to mend this one. Okay, so that right there, it's been mended. These two, I'm not going to tie a knot, I'm going to do an overlap, just like you would overlap when you ended up running out of a bobbin. This is what I need to still fix. I'm trying to figure out where, I got to remember where this thread ended, which didn't go all the way out. I could go all the way out because it's very short in width. So what I would like to do right now is get all my ends on one side. So but I don't have any of the floats that I had before. So I'm going to turn this over back to where I started. I have the end that I pulled out, my mending thread, and then I actually have this thread, but I need the mend from the other side. And I believe this is it right here, yeah. So here was that one. So these need to be overlapped like this. If you leave just a little bit between this thread that's running this way and this thread that's running this way, if you only leave a little bit, then wash the scarf, usually it does this, and then now there's going to be a hole. I normally overlap a good inch, inch and a half. It's better to have more of an overlap than less of an overlap. You can never add. You can always trim, but you can't add. So in my case, I'm going to take this and I'm going to overlap a little bit more. And in this one, I'm going to show you what to do on the corner because this is a little bit different. I don't need this much thread here, so what I'm going to do is just trim it shorter. leave this one. This one ran this way. This one ran this way. All right, so this was the other tail. This one's unplied a little bit, which is fine. This one right here hasn't. So what I'm going to do is, because I think I need a longer overlap than that, because I have not washed this particular item yet. So to be able to do this, sometimes it's hard to thread something that's short and then try to put this in there without pulling on it. So if you would, take it out, take your needle, and I'm not left-handed. If you take your needle from where you're at here, and then I'm just going to weave a little bit with my needle, probably, you know, over, under, over, under. Plain weave is probably the easiest one to start with when you're actually learning to mend, because the weave structure is not hard, but the tension that you're trying to achieve is harder. So I threaded the needle, turned it up. Now I'm going to, woven the needle, and now I'm going to thread the needle. So when you're doing this, you've already got this part correct. Now all I'm doing is doing this. Put your finger here so you don't pull. So what I did was make a bigger overlap, okay? This one I've left a little long too, so in case I need to pull these, because what I'm trying to do is make this look flatter, okay? If you want to go to the trouble of unplying these and doing a very feathered section here, you can, okay? I'm not going to do that, but when you do, once this is done, you just take your scissors and you're going to cut this tail. Make sure you don't cut the warp, then you're going to cut this tail. I tend to pull it back, put my scissors down, so I'm only cutting this part. So in this case, we have mended this particular one, grabbed every one of the floats on that one. The only thing I've not done is the actual corner, okay? So this one is a little different because I've gone to the corner. This one's just too short to mess with. This one is. That was the one that I cut. I'm going to use this because it's just easier. So this one I'm not going to cut short. I'm going to do it a little bit longer. Thread your needle because I have more thread to do this. And then everybody says, which one do I go in? Which pick? If I take the little smaller thread and I find it, you can see where it's at. It is actually, in my case, above this one. So if you notice, for the weave to continue, this thread that I have in the needle is under. It's under this one. The one I'm getting ready to do is over. So it's almost like you have this on a boat shuttle and you're going right back into the shed. So if you were under this one, I am now over, under, over, under. Just do a few because the selvages are hard. When I do this, what I've done is rounded the corner. Where this one normally would have gone in the bottom one, I'm now taking this one to go at the top. Selvages are much harder to mend, but sometimes it's easier to bring your mend threads to the edge. So once I've done that, I'm just going to continue a couple more warp threads. I'm over, and that's under, making sure that you're on the same pick that you actually were. If you need to do just 3 picks, do 3 picks. And when I do the 3 picks, I literally pull it out. I pull my excess to the point where I'm starting because I look at it, because it's easier to catch a mistake here. So I'm going to go a couple more and then I'm going to trim it. It's under. You see how I'm pulling it? I can see I'm under. Over, under, over. If I had a pointed needle, I'd probably be unplying. When I go under something, sometimes you can do this and it actually moves. and that tells you you haven't caught any extra threads. All right, I'm gonna do a couple more. Probably that's enough. Once again, when you feel it, there shouldn't feel like, there might be a bump in there because of extra thread, but there's not going to be a tension streak, like a pull on a sweater. So then I'm going to take this part, pull it, cut. Take the edge one, make sure you're not trimming don't cut the corner. You just want to bring your scissors in there, and just little embroidery scissors work the best. Like that. So then I've actually mended everything there. When I look at it, it looks just like a weave structure. When I turn it over right here, because I can see it, there's nothing there. This one right here, this one, if you look right here, sometimes I can put my finger, I can tell it's a work problem, but when you turn it over, it's the weft problem. So that's the one I'm going to mend next. But I hope you have understanding of how to splice a piece in, and then like I did on the end, how to just reweave a warp thread. Okay, so I have some work to do.